Hi, everyone. Welcome to PeopleMetrics Live. Today, we have a special guest speaker joining us from First American Bank, who's going to be reviewing the top 3 CX lessons in retail banking. So stay tuned.
So Adelbert, how did you get where you are today? Like, what could you describe your journey on how you got here, and responsible for the customer experience, and what leads someone to where you are today?
A lot of it's luck, I guess. It's hard to find. I think your career. I grew up in the Netherlands. I used to work for a Dutch bank, ABN AMRO Bank. Had an opportunity to come to Chicago for 3 years. Met my wife, came here, and then decided to join First American Bank. And I think from that perspective, I think what is nice about joining a small organization is that you get to have more responsibility and oversight. And I grew up on the commercial side, had an opportunity to roll into the retail side about probably like 12, 15 years ago now. And from that perspective, I think started learning about retail banking, which has been very interesting. And I think specifically because the customer experience is very different. The people you deal with are very different. And a number of years ago, I think we had some internal discussions about really understanding the customer needs. And I was at a conference, which I believe was in Miami, where I bumped into you guys and started a conversation. And I think from that perspective, I think Audrey has been, about 6 years now, I think 2016, something like that.
Yep.
That we have been partners. And I think for me, the educational experience really is, I think what the key is in all of this is knowing what the customer really thinks, because we have a perception of how we do things. And I think sometimes we're right, sometimes we're surprised what the customer really thinks. And getting the voice of the customer to really talk to you, I think has been the very educational experience for our organization. And that's piqued my interest. And I think other folks in our organization as well. So I think that has become more and more important throughout the years, trying to understand how we can improve the customer experience.
It's a really good point, Adelbert, where you said, customers have their views on how it's going, and companies always have their views on how they perceive it's going. And sometimes I think our programs help bridge that gap a little bit, right? And deliver kind of the truth to the organization around what the experience is. Is that something that you've experienced also?
No, absolutely. And I think, and one of the things I think that's important to us in our program, I think that we really want to have a genuine experience. And I say that because I think in banking, and probably in other institutions as well, you walk into a store and they say, here's your receipt. Oh, by the way, you're going to have a phone call. Please give me 5 stars. And to us, that really was not what we wanted to do with the program. I think it was really, really important to us. So we've never made it part of an incentive for our branches, which I think is really important because it really talks about people being genuine about asking for feedback. The other part, I think, where we're really, I don't know, unique, but I think is important to us is that we also don't want the survey to end in a black hole. In other words, you complete a survey, and I think in many cases you fill it out and you wonder what's being done with it. And in our case, I think our folks are really proactive in reaching out both on the promoters as well as on the detractors, in reaching out to them and see if they can resolve issues. And I think that has gone a long way in sort of managing the experience, not only from a customer side, but also getting our bankers engaged in the program.
It's interesting you mentioned promoters and detractors. I mean, Audrey, we usually hear people talk about detractors only and following up with them, which is, of course, critical. I'm curious, what are you doing with the promoters? Is there anything that you're doing to take advantage of knowing that people are recommending you as a bank?
I think it's a courtesy call more than anything else. And I think it's, again, I think talks about like, yeah, we heard you. I want to thank you, because I think one of the questions in our survey is really like, did somebody go above and beyond? And I think when somebody fills it out, I think it's really nice to acknowledge that back to the customer and say, I thank you for saying that, because at the end of the day, we're trying to do our best to help our customers, but getting a pat on the back sometimes is also very nice. So we celebrate those moments as well. And I think we want to thank our customers for that. And obviously out of that, our most important thing, have a relationship with somebody. And I think that's where this all comes back to, is that if you have a relationship with somebody, they talk to you about events that happen in our life and challenges they might have or opportunities they might have. And I think that gives us an opportunity to sort of engage and find out how we can help them better.
That's really interesting. So you must have seen, you've been in the industry a while, you must have seen the customer experience from a banking customer evolve over the past, like 10 years in a massive way. How could you give the audience some color on kind of how you see the experience of a banking customer different today than it was, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and how your bank is handling that?
I think the biggest difference, maybe not only that, but I think in many cases, I think we have lots of touch points that we have with our customers. And the customers choose how to interact with us. And in the old days, you go to the bank branch, that's where your banking was. And obviously, technology has changed that all tremendously. I'm not saying anything new here, but I think specifically in the last few years, with COVID, I think banks, and I think other industries as well, were pushing a lot of people into their digital experience. So it's different experience. Whether you go digital versus in branch, in person, is a very different experience. And being able to measure that and understand that the expectations of customers are different as well. I think it's really interesting to see that when you read the feedback, for example, about our digital experience, people really have an opinion about what they like about it and frankly, what they sometimes don't like about it. And I think that's been a very important lesson to us to really understand that you got to be present and really thoughtful in all the interactions, and getting a uniform experience to that customer base is really important because that's how they perceive you. And you can do well in one channel and not do well in another channel. That's not really good. You want to have a really uniform experience. And I think that's the lessons we're learning over the past few years.
Yeah, people have talked about this omnichannel experience that has consistency within whatever channel you're being delivered. But that's a big challenge, right? Compared to what it was like, where you had most of your customers coming into a location, and now they're, like you said, they're going onto the website, they're going onto a mobile app, they're calling a contact center, they're going to an ATM. There's so many different touch points now. It's an opportunity and a challenge, I can imagine.
Yeah, certainly so. And in many cases, I think we work with vendors as well on the banking side. And I think so you're a little dependent on them as well. You might not like what you get, but I think that's what we tie to, right? So I think we work very close with the vendors in giving feedback on how customers think about their experience and what they expect. Because as I think all of you know, I think most consumers have multiple banking relationships. So they have something to compare it to. And in the branch, I think it's easier to do because I think we talk about ourselves as being accessible and having people that you can sit down with and talk to. But an interface, whether you go to Bank A or Bank B or First American Bank, they have an opinion of what they like, right? Whether it's blue or whether it's green or whether the menu is on the hamburger menu on the left side or the right side, they have an opinion about that. And my kids do it all the time. I think my kids are the most frustrating customers ever. It's like they always have a comment about things. And I understand. And that's what you just need to listen to. And I think that's just what you learn. And I think part of that is also education, teaching them how things work I think is really important. But yeah.
Yeah, I was going to follow up with, you mentioned the relationship part, which I can imagine is so important. And I think you've alluded to this, but is it more challenging to develop a relationship with customers who aren't coming to see you face to face, and it's more of a digital relationship? And how do you create that in this world?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think it's a challenge for us, to be frank with you. I think the phone is our friend, so to speak. Email is our friend, and you try to find ways that people want to talk to you, but I always tell the bankers is that we know too much and we assume too much, right? When somebody walks in the branch every week, whatever, Friday afternoon at 3:00 because they need to get their cash for the weekend or whatever it is, then we get in a conversation, but we never take the conversation or assume that something might be happening in their lives. And I think so you always need to be asking those questions to make sure that you stay in contact and have an honest conversation with folks. So I think that's I think is an important lesson that we learn. And again, we get lots of feedback through the surveys as well.
Yeah, maybe we can do some more deep diving on the measurement part. You know, Adelbert, why is measurement so important to you and your bank? Like, what is it that makes measurement key to the whole customer experience working?
You cannot manage what you cannot measure, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, is if you don't measure it and you don't get a number or you don't get something about it, it's really hard to say you're doing a good or bad job. And I think we're not the only organization that mentions the NPS score, but I think it's just, for us, I think it's not the holy grail, but it's really something that I think we understand that people, I get phone calls from managers like, well, this person gave me a 1 and he really wanted to give me 10, read the comments, right? So I think that sort of talks about the engagement, but I think it's that part, I think really getting the branch engaged in the process, I think is really what counts.
Where do you see the banking industry going with regard to customer experience? Like if we're talking 10 years from now, what do you think we're talking about 5-10 years from now? Anything different than today?
No, I think it's the funny thing about banking and probably about other industries as well, I think we all tout our customer service, right? I think that's how we can have a bigger rate on a deposit account, or we can give you a better loan rate. But at the end of the day, you bank with us because of customer service. And so I think the customer experience is a lot behind the scenes of how we think about it and what we can do about it rather than just touting about it. But I also think that it'll be more integrated. And I think more or less is being learned. I think one of the things that we're working hard on is like, again, we've all done this, right? You go to a website, you go to Amazon or whoever, and you want to buy product A. The first thing you do, like, how many ratings do they have? And which ones are good and which ones are bad? So I think from our perspective, that whole experience is also externalized now more than internalized. And I think as an organization, we just need to do a better job in being part of that. And I think are people going to rate banking products and give you 3 stars, 5 stars? Probably not, but they might, as an organization, give you a rating. And I think that's going to be really helpful. And I think we've sort of worked with it a little bit internally on Google reviews. And we, through our marketing department, engage some firms that we help with that. But I think the customer experience itself, if they're willing to give us a survey answer inside, so letting us know, how can we also help them to sort of bridge the gap to do that externally so that they can tell other people what we do about them? Because most customers, or not most customers, but a lot of them, it's really word of mouth that we're getting new customers for. That's the best referral you can ever get. So having people work for you rather than you work for them, I think if you can get there, that I think will be the biggest change. Because, and then specifically, I think if you compete with larger banks, right? I mean, we're not a small bank, but we're definitely not a large bank. So we don't have a chase budget for marketing, right? You don't see us on the they're advertising on the Super Bowl, those kind of things. So you got to find a way to get the word out who you are and what you can do. And customer experience is really important in that.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize for the audience something you just said, that you're relying on word of mouth. Net Promoter Score is a word of mouth question, right? It's asking, a customer, would you recommend the bank to a friend or family member? And that seems to be really aligned with kind of your business objectives and your strategy in cultivating word of mouth. So that I'd imagine that's something you take a look at on a regular basis.
Yep, we do. And I think it's nice to see our NPS score over the last, we started with the mid 66s, we're now 73. So we've seen nice growth over time. We probably should take some credit for that. I don't know what causes it, but I think focusing on it again and managing it, I think is really important. I think you see those results. And again, I think we're going to talk a little bit later about Touchpoints and those kind of things as well, but maybe we'll dive a little deeper then.
Yeah, just for the audience, right, a Net Promoter Score can range from a -100, meaning if you had everyone being a detractor, to a +100 if everybody's a promoter. And 73 is an incredible score relative to other companies that we've worked with and other benchmarks that are available in the industry. Right, Audrey? That's really an impressive score.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's been consistently increasing over the 6 years or so that we've worked together, which is a testament to managing what you're measuring and making improvements.
Right.
Audrey, why don't you go a little bit deeper into the account?
Yeah.
Audrey's been working on this account. I'm taking up all the questions. So the floor is yours.
Well, so from First American Bank's customer experience data, we have pulled out three key lessons that we think are really important to share with the audience here. One of them is that touch points matter. And Adelbert, you alluded to this in some of the things that you were talking about a little bit earlier about omnichannel, and it's not just one way that customers are interacting with your bank. And I put these all up here because you are measuring feedback from customers at each of these touch points. I think we often see that people will set up one touch point or two and say, yeah, I'm listening to my customers. I reach out to them after they come into one of our branches and I know what the customer experience is, but they're forgetting about all these other experiences that a customer might have. So I think one of the reasons that your program is so powerful is that you are listening across all of these touch points. So do you want to tell us a little bit about why these are important? And
Yeah, no, happy to do that. And I think if you look at these 5 touch points, and I'll give a little bit more color on them, but I think new loan and new account, I think are pretty self-explanatory. But I think what's interesting there, of course, it's a new to bank customer. And if we always talk about you want to have your first experience to be a great one, that's what we measure there. And I think that's why this group is so important to us. What's also interesting in that group actually is the highest response rate that we get out of all our touch points. So I think we get somewhere between 20 and 30% response rate, which also means that the customers are really engaged, right? They chose a new organization, they want to do business with you, and they're willing to give you feedback. So I think that's been a really good, nice channel to listen to. The teletransaction, if I jump around a little bit, is very straightforward too. Easy to measure for us. Somebody walks into the bank, they do a transaction, we can measure that, we can ask questions about it, so that's easy as well. The other 2 channels I think are a little bit more, well, online and mobile is pretty easy too, in the sense that we query people who log on to our online bank for mobile. Every 6 months, they get a survey sent to them, and we get a pretty good response rate. I think it's the lowest that we get, is about 8%. But still, I think it's pretty significant. Critical maintenance is the one that's pretty unique to banks, I guess, is because in a bank, we have the teller transaction and we have what we call the platform. And the platform are your personal bankers, the branch managers, those kind of folks where you would go to open an account or have a little bit more sophisticated questions. So that's what we measure to the critical maintenance. So if something happens with your account, it could be as simple as changing an address. That's what will kick off this stream. But I think for us, what's really interesting here is that you can see differences by channel, how we're being perceived. And I think the one big lesson that we've learned was specifically when it comes to online and mobile banking. I touched upon it a little bit before, but our NPS scores are much lower than the other channels. Our teletransaction have the highest NPS scores. I think we have a great NPS score. The online and mobile were the lowest ones. But we got really good feedback out of the channel. And I think as a result, we're spending a lot of effort and money on the digital channel. We've upgraded our commercial banking early this year. We're in the process of doing the same for our retail online banking. That will happen in August this year. But it's going to be really interesting from that perspective to see if we see a change in the NPS score then as well. Because I think we really believe that we are upgrading our services, introducing some new features, and I would expect that hopefully then the NPS scores in that segment will go up as well. But the critical maintenance one is interesting because I think that's where that's what we hear from the customer if we resolve something correctly. And again, that gives us a really good reason to touch base with the customer and see if we resolve their issue, because that is resolving an issue. And I think that's going to be your next slide, Audrey, your next question, is key to this. So I'll lead you into the next question.
That's great. Well, what I want to talk about next is what customers really want. And I think this critical maintenance touch point is such a big part of that. I'm a banking customer, of course. And if I have to do some sort of maintenance on my account, I really want it to be easy and I want it to be fast. I don't want to have any problems. I just want to be able to go and do it. And if that's the way that it goes, then I'm happy. But if I have trouble with that, it leaves me in a place that of feeling frustrated. And if you don't know that, if you're not asking me about my experience and don't know that I'm frustrated, then you're at a loss as to how to manage the situation. So that's why I think this critical maintenance touch point is so important. And I really think it's giving you an advantage because not a lot of other people are measuring this touch point. As far as the next lesson that I want to talk about, it's what customers really want. And I think we've seen that people are going to have problems. No matter how good you are at what you do or the services you provide, problems will occur. And that's across companies, across industries. It happens to us. What's so important is how you deal with those problems. And what we found in your data, the last time we did analysis here, is that even when problems occur at First American Bank, most of them have happy endings because of the way that your team handles them. And this is what customers want. People know that problems are going to occur, but it's really all about what happens after they occur. So we put some examples up here, but talk to us a little bit about how you handle problem resolution at First American Bank.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for asking the question. I already touched upon it a little bit, right? I think it's being proactive with it and not being offended by it, and understanding that sometimes I think we resolve issues, but it just needs repeating, or somebody needs we got to listen. And there's a ton of reasons why problems happen, right? Some of them are in the bank's control, some of them are not. But I think, again, taking the time to go back to somebody and making sure it's resolved, I think is the most important thing. And I think through the surveys, I think one of the questions that we ask is, was your problem solved? And it's surprising that I'm going to say in many cases, I think about 60-70% is done on the first try. But I think there's a fairly large percentage where the customer perceives, or that it perceives, feels that the problem is not resolved. And we might have walked away from that conversation, from that phone call, from whatever it is, how we talk to the customer, saying that we did a great job. And I think that's where the opportunity is. And I think it's, and I forget the quote that I heard one time, but I think it's, to your point, Audrey, I think if you help somebody resolve an issue, everybody knows that things will go wrong. If you help them resolve it to their satisfaction, it really bumps your NPS score. It really does. I mean, I think if you just let your customer float and not give a reply or not get back to him or just send him from A to B to C, that just doesn't do very well. So I think this really gives us a nice finger on the pulse on how we do and what we can do. And again, I think we slice and dice the data sometimes by region, sometimes by branch. I don't necessarily give a lot of value to the branch number because I think it's the numbers can be somewhat small, and one bad review or one good review can really sort of put the data in one column or the other. But it's really, I think, helps our team to understand how they do as well. And I think that, again, is the value of it, making sure that we listen to the customer, that we do something about their issue, and make sure that it hopefully doesn't happen again, what they do. And
that's such a great point about it being not being offended by it, not being like upset that a customer has a problem, because we've seen this from data over the years from lots of banks and lots of different industries, that when there is a problem, it's a moment of truth for the organization. And you can convert that problem into a promoter if you handle it well with empathy and speed and resolution. Or if you don't handle it well, that person could turn into a detractor pretty easily. Right. And there is, Audrey, right? Like sometimes there's no in between. And it's the opportunity to really convert someone into a promoter if you handle their problem well.
And I think this is where the rubber meets the road as well, because if you say that you believe in customer service, if you say that you're going to take care of somebody, then I think this is the opportunity to reach out and have a conversation about it. And some of the conversations are not nice at all, right? We charge a fee for something because we charge a fee. I mean, I think that's, we feel like we have a right to charge a fee. We disclose we can charge a fee, but sometimes people don't like it. Well, have a conversation about it and maybe find out that there's a different opportunity, a different account, different product that might be better suited. Because again, sometimes I think we know too much, and I think we're only going to find out by talking to the customer how we can resolve some of these issues. And sometimes we cannot resolve them, and that's okay too.
That willingness to listen to the customer is so powerful. And I think what we're going to show next is so compelling to show what a difference it makes when you're willing to go the extra mile and help customers resolve their problems. I've seen programs where people feel really good about what they're doing because they're measuring feedback and they're aware of problems that are occurring, but they're not going that extra mile and reaching out to individual customers to close the loop and resolve problems. And here we can show you what a difference it makes. I think we're looking at about 1,000 of your customers, Adelbert, that responded to the survey that said, yes, I did have a problem in my interaction. And then we asked that follow-up question, was your problem resolved? Were you in contact with anybody about it and was it resolved? And for people who said, yes, my problem was resolved promptly, their NPS is 73, which is where your overall NPS score is. For those people who said, I told somebody and my problem was never resolved, or I didn't report my problem, you can see on the left side here, their NPS is dramatically lower. And what a difference it makes. All these people had a problem. The difference here in their experience is whether it was addressed by somebody at First American Bank.
Right. Yeah, I find it's very revealing when you share this data, Audrey, that it's like it's so in your face here, and it just shows what you need to do to get it done on the first try. And I think that's sort of what we talk about with our branch folks, and they know. I mean, I think it's, again, much of this is not rocket science. I think we've all know how this works, but the execution part, I think, is the key to the success. I think that's what you really need to sort of measure to, and I'm really happy. I mean, I think. I get emails probably on a daily basis where people say, like, I resolved this issue like this. I mean, they don't have to copy me. They don't have to do this, but I think they know that it's near and dear to my heart. And I really appreciate that feedback, because again, it provides you feedback on how we can do a better job. And I think that sort of talks about the engagement that the team has in making this an important part of their day-to-day job.
This is such a great chart, Adelbert and Audrey. Like, you know, it's such a clean story. And it doesn't take a lot of explanation to figure out that resolving problems quickly really, really pays off, especially if you're relying on word of mouth to gain new customers.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's the interesting part. I think it's like you think you're just asking for an NPS score, but you get all this other stuff with it that you can do something about. And I think that's sort of where the additional values. NPS is one measurement, but I think we're getting more data and more info out of the qualitative data than we get out of the quantitative data. I mean, the quantitative data is there and it moves and it's okay, but getting the qualitative data, I think, has been really valuable to us.
And just to remind everybody, Alexandra, if you just go back one slide, that was qualitative data that we were showing there. These are comments that we're asking from your customers, right, at First American Bank around different parts of the experience, and getting these comments. My experience is, Adelbert, that these are the comments that kind of get people's attention because they can relate to it. A number is interesting, but a comment, you can almost feel a person saying it. Yeah,
that's very true. I agree with that, Sean. That's like, it's again, it goes back to even the pat on the back, right? I think it was very important to us. And I think you guys were very helpful in sort of designing the right questions too. I mean, we look at the questions probably every 6 months or so and see if we need to change something. But some of them have been in there for a long time. And I think 6 questions, but I gave you a lot of data that we find to be really helpful.
I think a lot of what is so inspiring about your program is that you're not afraid to have hard conversations with customers, even if you're unable to tell them what they want to hear, and that you're driving the customer experience from the top down at First American Bank. And the numbers, the data supports that. You can see, just on that last slide where we showed that people, are okay with having problems as long as you're willing to address them and work through it with them. So yeah, thank you for your partnership. Thank you for joining us. I think we might have questions. I'm not sure, Alexandra, if we have time.
Yeah, I think we can squeeze in one question. Okay. As technology advances, customer needs change. How do I keep my CX program up to date based on these changes?
Good question. Interesting question. I think I touched upon it a little bit earlier too, in the sense that you got to look inside and outside. It's customer service happens on both sides, and I think technology will help us to sort of look at the external reviews that we have, as well what happens internally. And sometimes the two, some people are more comfortable giving one piece of feedback, another piece of feedback. And I think you've got to be able to build that link. But the better we can communicate the customer experience to the outside, I think the better off we are as an organization. And again, and that goes back to both bad and good, right? It's like, I think if you read, you go to Amazon and everything is rose is shining, like, well, is that really true? Because I think people are smart enough to distinguish between the real bad stuff and the real good stuff. And I think they just sort of can, they through, I think, have learned how to deal with that. But I think for us as an organization, I think banking is a little bit different than when you sell pizzas. I think I think that's going to be the journey that we need to go through and sort of get better at, and really be able to vocalize who we are to a customer, how customers think about us. I think that's the next key, and technology is going to help with that.
Yeah, and whether you're selling pizzas or banking services, when somebody has a good experience and you trust them and you ask them as a trusted friend or colleague, who would you go with in this circumstance? That just holds tremendous weight. So creating these experiences, it like pays off. I always say this, it pays off down the line in areas you don't even really realize, because you're not in that room when that conversation is happening, or on that text thread when that conversation is happening, when that question gets answered. And if you've delivered a good experience, or if someone had a problem and you resolved it quickly, that just goes such a long way in terms of building credibility with customers. Yep.
Well, I want to thank you all for your partnership too. You've been a great partner and easy to work with and very insightful. So thank you.
Thank you, Adelbert.
Well, thank you all for joining us and sharing your expertise with us today. This has been a really great session. And thank you all for tuning in to PeopleMetrics Live. We'll see you next time. Take care, all.